guys come in and we've just lost a lot of the spaces where men used to mentor younger men.
I'm sober, therefore I am perfect. Quite the opposite.
You need masculine and feminine mentorship in your life, and you need both perspectives.
Again, accountability, which I think is a huge part of masculinity. Consistency, accountability, and transparency.
How can the 12 step program help guys refine their masculinity in healthy ways? What does it look like when men take their healing away from control and isolation into connection and growth? If you're curious about either of those questions, you're in the right place. My name's Tim Winicki. This is American Masculinity. And on our 12th episode, we're bringing on Kevin Peterson. Kevin is a multi-decade clinician who's been in recovery for 35 years. He did what the most noble of us do. He took his experience and his pain and figured out how to use that to help others. We're so lucky he's in the world, and I'm really happy to bring him on to share his insights with you. Remember, this isn't therapy, and this isn't going to be recovery. This is going to help you be a little curious about these processes. If these are resources that you need, go find them. This will be a little crack in the door, but it won't get you there. So if this sounds good, if what Kevin's pitching to you sounds like something you're looking for, go find it. I hope you get the help you need. With all that said, let's get started. Hey, Kevin, thanks so much for coming on, man. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. It's great to see you. And I have been looking forward to this all week. This is fantastic.
I always like talking to you about addiction because you're one of my trusted people around integration of 12-step. Like, you and I's perspective differs a little bit, as I don't think it's required. I think it's just very, very useful. But you're one of the people I can call if I need to and say, what's going on with this meeting in this part of town? Why doesn't this person like lining up? And it's
Yeah,
fantastic. So I'm really excited that we're going to share some of that here with the folks.
me too.
I guess the first thing that I want to ask about is masculinity and 12-step. So we know addiction is primarily guys, right? More men than women struggle with addiction. Women struggle harder when they do. But how does 12-step influence your masculinity and your client's masculinity?
Okay, we're going to start right off.
Just
I
jumping
love
right
it.
in.
The deep end has been found. That's a great question, and it's one that I've actually been reflecting on for a couple of different reasons. One is that last Monday was 34 years for me sober.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we get to our anniversaries, we tend to ruminate or think or look at that. And so I was looking at your questions and sort of searching on that. And so here's the thing that I think is really important for me, and the answer to the first part of the question. The 12 steps, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, wherever you want to go with that. When you look at the 12 steps, the first half of the first step says we were powerless over alcohol, insert blank, whatever, you fill in the blank. And that's the last time we talk about drugs or alcohol in the 12 steps. And then the second half says, and our lives had become unmanageable. So you can look at, 11 and a half steps are going to be focused on how you behave, how you interact with other people, how you rub elbows, how you treat people, the kind of treatment you accept from people. And that's kind of I would say the big secret, right? Or not secret, but like, is that in the recovery world, people that come just to get sober, that's great, but they're only getting about 5% of what we offer. What we offer, the other 95% of what we offer is learning how to rearrange your life and go after things. So for a man, like when I got sober, I was 27. And I mean, I think I might have had some concepts or ideas. I'd done a lot of therapy with my dad. I had, read Iron John and stuff like that, and really got into Joseph Campbell. So I was definitely sort of delving into what is masculinity, what isn't. But for me, it was very much, I could read all that stuff intellectually, but I didn't know how to put it into practice. I didn't understand what that meant. So through the 12-step process, all the different parts, I started realizing that that's where I was applying it, and a big piece is obviously, how we we write inventory in the fourth step, right? And inventory has three parts, right? There's resentment, there's fear, and then there's sex. It's actually conduct. It's not sex. It's how we behave in relationships. And the first time I went through that with my sponsor back in Los Angeles, I had long resentment list of, and everyone says the same thing. I'm not mad at anybody. It's like, yeah, nice try. You walked in here today pissed at the guy that took your parking spot, so let's just start there. And that's okay. You just got to work your way through that stuff, right? And there's a process, right? The resentment has we call it 4-column inventory, and there's an exercise that you go through. Fear is the same thing. But as time goes on and you continue to do the process, the 12 steps over, and you write inventory over and over, you start getting to the core, right? I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of recreating my parents' marriage. I'm afraid of that I'm never going to find anybody. And I'm afraid that I'm just going to be miserable the rest of my life. That's the core stuff we start getting at. And then in conduct, we start looking at how we treat people in relationships. Did we arouse jealousy, suspicion, and bitterness? Did we cheat on them? I mean, we really just take full accountability. That was the first time in my life that another man helped me take full accountability for my behavior. And then in the fifth step, we share that. And then 6 and 7, we garner what we call the character defects, which really, like when I was reading my inventory to my sponsor, he would say, write this down. I use women for fill in the blank. I lie, I cheat, I steal. So by the time we got done with that, I had my list of character defects. And it was very straightforward and simple. And then we get to the amends piece. And for me, there was a lot of, making amends was a lot of going after the relationships that I'd had and explain, not making amends, which means offering to make it right, not apologizing. And we apologize, but we're like, that's just the beginning,
Now there's accountability.
Well, right. And, please tell me how, so here's the 4 parts of amends. Here's what I remember doing. Please tell me how it affected you. Have I left anything out? I don't like that part, and then how can I make it right? And we really, if you take it seriously and you really do it, you're the big fear, right, is that you're always putting yourself in the other person's hands, but you're really not. You're putting yourself into your higher power's hands, or whatever you want to call it. Again, accountability, which I think is a huge part of masculinity for me. Is consistency, accountability, and transparency.
A man shows up,
and that shows up in masculinity. And the other side of that too, right, is that I want to be clear. This isn't about being perfect, because I think part of being sober and part of being in recovery and part of being masculine or being a man is admitting to being imperfect and making mistakes, and it's okay to make those mistakes, and certain mistakes. It's if you struggle with infidelity, it's not okay to keep making that mistake over and over. But you learn that there. You learn that no, that's not okay. A lot of guys, honestly, I swear to God, I'm not making this up. A lot of guys are like, oh, everybody cheats. And I'm like, no, everybody that drinks and does drugs does, yes. But, people that are sober are really battling to change, not just get rid of the drugs and alcohol. That's like the ticket to the show. That's the price of admission, right? The real show is, how do I learn how to treat other people with dignity, respect, integrity, and how do I treat myself with that? How do I honor my parents? How do I honor my partner? How do I show up for my friends and my family, and differently, and behave differently? And when I make a mistake, am I willing to show up and be like, that was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. That was me.
Well, so it sounds like a lot of this for the 12-step is the mentorship of it, that, and I think I know I keep seeing this across my practice, where guys come in and we've just lost a lot of the spaces where men used to mentor younger men. And 12-step is a beautiful place for that, because it's part of it, like immediately. You walk in and somebody tries to step up to be your mentor. And like you're talking about, how we engage with people integrates into the way we exist in the world and our problems. And so of course that has to be addressed.
Well, absolutely, and that's the thing. And I mean, and here's sort of one of the central cores of that concept for us is we can get you sober and keep you sober. That's really not that hard, believe it or not. But if we don't change the way you live, you will start drinking again. Because you're back into that rhythm of lying, cheating, stealing, hustling, cutting corners. And so drinking and doing drugs starts to become normal again. And I want to be clear, we're not trying to be perfect. We're not trying to be puritanical. We're not trying to, I'm sober, therefore I am perfect. Quite the opposite. It gives us a path of how to behave that is an instructional path from older men, right? That are like, here, let me show you. I mean, this is one of the beauties of that process for a sponsor is I never tell people what to do. I'll tell them my opinion, but I'm like, this is your lesson. You need to learn this. Now, I want to explain to you that when I was in that situation, this is what I did. You need to do whatever you're going to do. And but I'll share with you my wisdom and my vision and my concept. But
having space to share that on purpose is just hard to find anymore. And it's one of the reasons why, like, I refer back to 12 steps so often for my sober clients. Like I think it was just a few months ago, I had a guy who hit his 20 year of sobriety, but was moving back into being a dry drunk. And he just ran the steps again. Right? He just re-engaged in the process, picked it up from where he was in his life, and found new and different things. It's one of those that as you work them, just like most clinical tools, I would say, most tools for self-exploration work like this. You can do them once and you learn a lot, but the more you do them, the deeper you get. And yeah, they putter out at some point, but you can always come back to them after some dirt's been thrown back on.
Well, and in that process, right? In that 12-step process, when we get to 12, it's about carrying the message and sharing it with other people and making yourself available as a sponsor, And that is probably the greatest joy, right, of recovery is having someone that you're connected with and talking to and just, And look, everybody screws up. Everybody does it wrong the first couple of times. It's just like therapy, right? You're first out of the gate, you're like, oh my God, what was I thinking? But the critical thing there is that within our community, we offer to everyone what's going on. And the cool part is a healthy recovery community. Let's just be clear, a healthy recovery community. Your sponsor will look at you and say, I don't have any experience with that, but you should go talk to that guy. That guy, I mean, this happened to me in my first year. I was in the hole with the IRS. I owed them like $7,000, and I thought, oh my God, they're going to come get me, And I talked to my sponsor, and he was like, "Oh, Kevin, I owe them $500,000." And he's like,
Give you a little bit of perspective there.
Yeah, he goes, "You're fine. Call the phone number, make a deal. They'll pick the pay. Everything's gonna be fine." Like, but I needed that guy to say, "Hey, here's what's up, and here's why and how," and all the way to me going back to graduate school. I have a friend in Boulder who's a nurse who's sober, my friend Brad, and he was going to nursing school in 2007, and I sat him down. I'm like, okay, I am 43 years old. I'm 17 years sober, and I am miserable. This is horrible. And he's like, yeah, let's talk about it. I said, and he had left the business world to go to school. And I'm like, how did you come up with that? He's like, well, so much of what we talk about in recovery is, making ourselves available to others and helping others. And he's like, the people I look up to, the men I look up to, they are, they're doctors, they're nurses, they're, social workers, they work in corrections. These are people that have dedicated their lives to helping other people. And he realized that's what I wanted. And I'm like, you're singing my tune. He's like, I think you'd make a great therapist. And I said, yeah, I think so too.
I think that's one of the things that distincts community from like a support group or something like that. It's a group of people who know enough about each other to be able to show up and be of service to the community in their lane.
I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Is that, like, I go back in Jacksonville, I go to meetings Saturday morning and Sunday morning, and they're both men's meetings. And not because I don't like women and I don't like being around women. I actually like going to meetings with women. I think they're fun and they have really interesting. It's nice to engage and interact. And by the way, it just popped into my head. In the co-ed meetings, I got taught how to behave and how to treat women, because the older women and the older guys would watch me when I first got there and I was using it like a bar, and they would pull me aside and go, we don't do that here. That behavior is unacceptable. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, mm-mm, and so now, of course, I find myself pulling guys aside like, hey, wait, you're making this an unsafe space for these women. It's not okay. And by the way, it goes both ways. There are women that are constantly, looking for the next guy to fix them. And even in the LGBTQ community as well, in recovery.
Yeah, the next partner to fix as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, I mean, those lessons are just sort of, generationally passed on. And I loved my father. My father was the reason I got sober. He's the one that cornered me and said, you either get sober or you're out of the family. And he held his ground. I credit him with starting the process of saving my life. But we never had these conversations. And no fault of his. I mean, I love my dad, and he passed away 4 years ago.
I'm sorry you lost him.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it just, this just wasn't him, and I know his dad didn't have the conversations with him, and they wouldn't even know how. And I'm not saying I replaced my dad, quite the opposite. I got to a space where I really learned to love and respect my father for what he did. My mom was a prescription drug addict and had a lot of mental health issues. And God bless her, I loved her too. My dad dealt with that. My dad was very successful while maintaining a household with someone that was really struggling, which created an interesting example. So what I witnessed as marriage is one person who's got it together and handles things, and one person who's kind of a disaster and has to be handled. And so in my first marriage, what do you think I looked for? And I followed the exact same model.
Well, I think that's the other beautiful thing about good communities. We've talked about this. I really dislike the idea that a family unit is supposed to be all we need, and particularly as children. There's no way one or two people can be everything a child or a person needs. And so I think there's a lot of people that come into therapy or come into 12-step that are looking for those spaces that their fathers didn't fill, their mothers didn't fill. And you can find them there. But it also, as you find those supports, it lets you see where your parents were for you, which is a really, really healing place to be.
And I will also share with you in a similar parallel route, I found women to, this is going to sound wrong, but mother me or treat me like a son and be very kind and loving with me, and show me, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And here's a big piece. What I should be accepting from women, what I shouldn't be accepting from women, behavior. And that also contributed to my masculinity, is the women mentoring me as well and saying, hey, look, you need to be careful for X, Y, Z. Don't fall into these traps where you're not the white knight. You don't have a cape on. You're a man, you're a good man, you're a solid man, but you're not everything.
Well, and I think that touches on something really important that I haven't talked about much yet, but there's this big push in the manosphere that men only need men and women are just there for whatever. And you need masculine and feminine mentorship in your life. You need people that are a little bit further along than you may be in this, and you need both perspectives. And it doesn't matter whether it's like a butch lesbian or an effeminate male friend. there's a different energy in what they see in the world and what they can guide you through.
It was like 20 something years ago. I had a female friend that I was working with, and I was 36 or something along those lines, way back, way back then.
In the long, long ago.
Yeah, in the previous century, and she and I were chatting, and I was talking about dating and this, that, and the other thing, and she's like, "Can I give you some advice?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And she's like, "You're sober, you're spiritually based, you're educated, you have a career, you're a good man, and you like children." I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "You don't got to be putting up with any woman's nonsense." And she's like, "You need to understand, Kevin, it's not like we were in college where everyone's chasing the hottie, And she goes, "And women do the same thing, by the way." And I was like, "Yeah." Mm-hmm. And she's like, "That's over. At this age, people have either been married and divorced and been burned, severely burned, or they've been too scared to get all the way in." And she's like, "You need to be super picky and super careful." Now, I did not listen to her advice the first time, but the second time when I was 50, and I met my current wife, my current and final wife, I was really upfront with her in the opening conversations. I was like, "Look, I'm 50 years old, and this is what I want. I want a partner. And I want a partner that's going to continue to work on their mental health, or their sobriety, career, et cetera, et cetera. And I want a partner where we can have really blunt and uncomfortable conversations together." And we talked all that stuff out for like the first couple of weeks. She was actually out of the country,
Oh, well, I'm glad that slowed things down so those conversations had some room to breathe.
Right. And that really, I would tell you, that was foundational for me in learning that it was okay for me to say those things. I wasn't being selfish or rude or inconsiderate or demanding or what's the current term, narcissistic, or any of those, overly masculine things. I was like, "No, I'm just telling you this is what I want."
Well, and if you're not, you can be kind and direct at the same time. And I think that's where a lot of people get it mixed up. There is a kindness in direct to say to somebody, "This is what I'm looking for and who I can be to you. Is that what you want? Can you provide that to me?" And if not, then that's what friends are for. That's what community is for. There's dozens, hundreds, thousands of lovely people that I adore in my life that will not be my wife.
But I think also, and again, sort of circling back into the 12 steps in recovery and how that plays into masculinity, those were the places where I found people to sort of walk me through that. I had a woman in LA when I was back living there in the early 90s who, she was my mother's age, and we worked at the same place and went to meetings, and one time we were sitting and chatting, and I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I cook, I clean, I do my own laundry, blah blah blah. I'm very self-sufficient." She looked at me and she's like, "I have a question for you," and I said, "Okay." She goes, "I don't want you to get offended." And I said, "Okay." She's like, "Where was your mother?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Kevin, most men your age don't know how to do that stuff. They're not self-sufficient. They don't know how to cook. They don't know how to clean. They don't know how to do laundry. They might have an idea, but you're very efficient at all of those things. And generally, that's something that's done for you as a child." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that wasn't my house. We had to learn how to handle that stuff on our own." So, and I'm going to tie this back. My wife today, my lovely, amazing wife, Amy, we got married in 2016, and we had some rough times. There's been some big challenges, right? She had cancer in 2018. There's been a lot of, all of our parents have died, and there's just been a lot of trauma, a ton of trauma. And we've come out of it to another side. But we had a conversation, I want to say a couple of years ago, and I was like, "Look, here's the thing. You need to understand. This is how I was raised. I came home, and I didn't know if it was going to be mom, drunk mom, or stoned, or passed out mom. And so I never knew what I was coming into the house. I never knew was the house going to be clean, and we lived in a beautiful multi-million-dollar home. Was it going to be clean? Was there going to be dinner? Was it going to be organized? And those are the things I said, those are the things I crave. I crave structure. I crave, having someone cook for me. And not because you're the woman. I was really clear. I'm like, I don't see that as your job. I'll cook. I love cooking. But my thing that I love and embrace is when somebody cooks for me or takes care of me. And I don't mean like a child, like an infant. I know you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, just some tending. That's how I refer to it for me. Is like just a little tending when I'm having a rough day goes a long way.
Or just in the general connection of our relationship, I was giving her clear path is these are the things I like and want and that make me feel safe and secure. And she has done the same thing. These are the things that I want from my partner. Got it. I will do those things. Again, I learned that in sobriety.
Yeah, that is the one hilarious thing when you walk into a meeting, which, by the way, everybody listening, there are open meetings where you don't need to be in recovery to go. And if you have someone in your life in recovery, I really advise you to go do that at least once. But one of the things I love about being in that room is everyone's pretty straight line. like there's not a lot of like dissemination or like backbiting. Everybody's very direct in whatever's going on for the most part, and it's kind of nice.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, people tend to be pretty genuine and pretty authentic. Now, the other side of that is, right, people that are new are still struggling with, staying sober and waking up. I'm like, oh my God. There's a lot of people that are newly sober, tend to start having feelings and emotions that they haven't had for a long time. And so they really struggle with that. And, they got to sort through that. By the way, I am also a massive advocate in the world of recovery and in the rooms of recovery of that's not AA's responsibility. Our job is to get you sober and teach you how to behave like an adult. That's it. Therapists will help you learn how to process your emotions and your feelings. That's their job, and they're there to help you for that. But if you aren't sober, they can't do their job.
Yeah, our job becomes helping you manage the consequences of your use.
Which, frankly, and I love my therapist friends, we're just better at that because it's our personal experience.
Well, I also, it breaks down. I did an episode I think it's going to come out next week on levels of care. And essentially it just puts you into case management. When somebody's actively using, you're not doing therapy, you're doing case management. If you're doing your job well, you're trying to help them see the consequences of what's happening, how to cope with them, and so that they can make an informed decision about when to stop. But your idea is that kind mirror of, would this happen if you weren't there that Friday night? Would this happen if that hadn't been part of the equation?
Absolutely. I'll tell you from my experience when I was still drinking and using, when therapists would start saying stuff like that to me, I would be like, oh man, I got to find a new therapist.
I need somebody that'll just tell me to shut the hell up and do the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't come here for accountability.
Did that ever change for you, or is that still just where you go to 12-step for that?
No, I think the two can go together. I think someone who's enlightened on both sides, right? I think a good sponsor and a good therapist. I'll throw this in too. So I used to go to a church in downtown Denver, Central Presbyterian, this big, beautiful, old, gorgeous Presbyterian church. And the minister there was somebody I really looked up to. He's really awesome. And my AA meeting, one of my AA meetings was there too. So the minister was this great guy named Mark Ramsey, and he and I were talking about my sobriety, church, faith, et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, Kevin, I want to be really clear. It's not my job to get you sober or keep you sober. That's AA's job. My job is to help you expand your faith, and I can't do that if you're not sober. So I want you to go to meetings. I would never tell you not to go to meetings. I want you to go to meetings. But I also want you to engage in what we offer, because I think we can enhance your understanding of the world and your life. And I was like, yeah. And I think the same thing goes with therapy, right? I think for me, I have a wonderful therapist that I think walks on, well, I don't know if she walks on water, but she's pretty awesome.
She does in your sessions.
Yeah, well, right. She's very 12-step savvy. She knows the gig. She's very, very knowledgeable. And to be totally blunt, she's confided in me a smidge, that was her family system, and that's why she does this. And I need someone, for my therapist, I need someone that understands my world, or two of my worlds, right? My therapy world and my recovery world. And she's perfect for me. She's absolutely perfect for me.
Yeah, because she integrates. But how many therapists did you go through to find her?
Bro. I was, at that point, I was 30 years sober, okay? And I've done therapy pretty consistently for the last, since 2008, right? So when I went back to graduate school. And I had wonderful therapists, not to say anything like that, but here, okay, so here's what happened. My father passed away in July of 2021. My mom died in 2014. Towards the end of the year of 2021 and rolling into 2022, I was really struggling. I mean, really struggling. And my wife said, she's like, I want to talk to you about something, but I just don't want you to get mad or angry or defensive. And I'm like, too late.
Well, now I am. Let's go.
Yeah. And I'm like, what's up? And she's like, you're so angry. You're so angry. And she's, I think you need some help. I think you need to talk to somebody. And I was like, and I had been seeing someone that it just wasn't going anywhere,
Or it had ran its course.
Right. And I was like, yeah, you're right. No, you're totally right. Honey, you're completely right. I said, I have someone in mind. I'm going to call her and make an appointment with her. And I called her and we had a phone conference. And she said, well, Kevin, I want to let you know something. I process grief and loss through trauma. So if you're up for that journey, I'm up for working with you. I was like, oh, this is going to suck. and it's been amazing.
Better on the other side, though.
Well, and it's still there.
No, grief never goes away entirely. That's a hole in your life that you got to learn how to operate around.
Yeah, or with it. I mean, it's part of who you are. As we get older, we experience more grief situations, and we have to learn that that's part of life. Guess where I learned that? And I learned that in a lot of the 12-step engagement and my sponsorship engagement where, we would go through courses of life together, right? Marriage, divorce, struggling financially, success, school, graduation.
Well, and those transition points are so key to have mentorship around. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't generally understand is that if you've been going through your life and you've been doing okay, and all of a sudden you're not, it's usually around a time that something pretty big changed. And it's because the way that you've been operating the world isn't working for your new world. And that's where 12 Step's great, because someone in that room has made that step.
Absolutely. I mean, just the even when it's just sort of an off comment of someone. I remember my first year sober, I had always had jobs where I made a lot of money, and so I was always very generous in gifting and presents and at Christmas, which we could do a whole episode on that, let me tell you. I've had to learn a lot about that process. But I was working a subsistence level job, man, and I was living in a $400 a month room in a house, and I was barely getting by. And I was in an AA meeting, and I was freaking out. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. My family, we're generous and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm just worried about what's my dad going to think. And this old guy, his name was Ed, and he looked at me. He's like, Kevin, the gift you're giving your family is that you're sober and that you're alive. And, do you understand what a massive gift that is that you're giving them, and how happy they'll be? And he said, and, as far as your dad, get him a tie. And if he doesn't like it, get him. And I was like, oh, right. Perspective.
I'm highly amused that your room at the low point was $400 a month in a house, because that's exactly where I was right before I joined the military. In that same kind of situation of just I can't get it together. I'm not finding work. This isn't going well. I need something.
Yeah, man.
And it sounds like you had some good guidance and it got you where you needed to go, and now you're doing just fine.
I mean, my life's great. It's not perfect. It's great.
Well, meaning goes a long way, and once you can find a way to have money and have meaningful work in your life, and I want to be really clear here, you don't need to do like public service work to be happy. If your job pays you enough for you to give you the freedom to go do that, that works too. But you need both.
Absolutely. And I mean, just to be totally blunt, I think at 18 years old, the last thing I should have done is gone to college. That was a huge mistake in judgment on my part. But it was what was expected. I should have followed you. I should have gone to the military.
Well, yeah, and that's been really nice with the newest generation of guys, is they're slowing that down a lot more because they watch so many of us crash and burn through it. And we know that guys generally don't make it through college now their first time. Like, I think only 1 in 4 was the data quoted in Reeves's book. I'll double check that and put that up. But it makes sense sometimes to be out in the world before picking education in debt. The problem I'm finding lately with some of the young guys is they don't go out into the world. They stay living at home. They don't go get the crap job. You need to get out of the house and go work the crap job. I know it's harder because of the cost of living and everything has gotten so much worse, and it's so much harder to survive on your own with a subsistence job. But you got to find something, because that gives you the direction to find your thing and a reason to go find it. It's too comfortable at home.
Absolutely, man. I could not agree with you more. After I flunked out of college and went back home, and I was, bartending and selling weed, because it was, 1990, and that's what you did, and
that's a good side gig when you're bartending.
Yeah, well, nowadays they call it a side hustle, but that's just what we did,
Yeah.
And it's not even illegal anymore. And my dad confronted me when I was 26, and I didn't get sober till I was 27. And in that 9 months of that space, right, that August to May, I started seeing a therapist with him, a great guy. And we started having these amazing conversations where he and I started putting all our cards on the table. Him telling me about his life and the expectations placed on him. Me telling me, and everything was okay. There was no jockeying for position, and it was it was amazing, right?
Yeah, there was safety because that was what that space was for.
Right, exactly. But one of the byproducts of that is I started looking around at my life, and I was like, I am 27 years old, and I'm bartending at a really nice restaurant in a really nice place, but I have achieved. I have maxed out. I'm probably making, a couple $100 a day. This is 1991, $200-300 a day, salary, blah, 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 and hourly or whatever. But this is it. It's not going to get any better, And I saw the guys that were twice my age doing the same thing I was doing. And I was like, oh, no.
Well, and service work can get really isolating too, just because you're working such off hours from everybody else, that it makes it really hard to have a life outside of the service industry.
Yeah. Well, and then, that industry tends to have a lot of folks that are struggling, because it's quick cash and easy.
I want to because I've been kind of struggling with how to direct some clients in this, so I was looking forward to talking to you about it. Let's say that someone's newly sober. They've hit their wall and they need to go get sober, and they're going to go shop meetings. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't fully understand about 12-step is if you're in a metropolitan area, there are literally hundreds, and they have drastically different feels with drastically different people, which means that when you walk into one and it doesn't feel right, stay for the meeting and then go find a different one. What could speed up that process for people when you've got clients through that? What are the tips you give them when they're shopping those meetings?
Like if somebody, like if it's a client or even a friend, I had a friend call me today, actually, and I was like, you want to find your tribe, your people, right? So what that means is you probably want to, when you look through the guide, there's a great app now, by the way. It's a folding chair, which is what we use. Men, women, gay, topics, speakers. I always tell people, go try a speaker meeting. You just have to listen for an hour. You don't got to talk. And you know what? Try a men's meeting. You might feel more comfortable there. Try a women's meeting. You might feel safer. For women especially, it's so important for them to feel incredibly safe. And I think that's really critical. My wife only goes to women's meetings. She's like, I'm at the point where that's just where I want to be.
Well, and I don't think there's anything wrong with needing gendered space, right? And I don't think that's a masculine or a feminine thing. I think we just need to be around each other sometimes for a certain kind of problem, a certain kind of energy. And so what I'm hearing you say is essentially you've just got to go and do the reps, but go try different things, like go to different areas of town, go try different types of meetings. Don't just kind of go hit the 3 meetings closest to you.
Well, yes, and you can also be like, if you live in Cherry Creek, try the Cherry Creek meetings. They're probably your people. If you don't like it, try another one. And the other side of it too is some people are early morning people, man. They love that 7 a.m. stuff. You got to pull my fingernails out to get me to do that, you know. But I like going to a meeting at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. It's when I'm there. It's when I'm emotionally present. It's really funny as I've gotten. I used to go to meetings that would start at 7 or 8 in the evening, and I loved them. I'm in bed by then. You know.
Yeah, that's a little heavy for a late night thing for me anymore. My last session ends at 4.
Right. Exactly. And so I encourage people, and because I know the atmosphere or the stratosphere in Colorado, when somebody says, hey, I've got a guy who's 40 years old, he's got kids, he's got a wife, he's in the commercial real estate business, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, oh, okay, send him here. I know where those people are.
Yeah, you're one of the numbers I have for that. And I think that's important if somebody's moving into recovery. That's why you need a therapist that understands addiction and recovery. Because even if we don't know the meetings, we should know someone who does, that we can call and get you some guidance.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And I'm happy to dispense that to anyone at any time. I mean, I definitely get emails and texts and calls like, hey, I have a woman, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, go here, call this person, check it out, see what you think.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I found you and why I like you so much is that you're a guy who joins community by being of service to community. And you can't beat that in a person in your life.
I think it's super important, and you mentioned this earlier, for therapists to learn more about the 12-step community, because what I tend to get, I'll just be honest, what I tend to get is they're listening to their clients tell them how awful it is. And then they talk to me and they're like, well, she doesn't want to go to AA. It's too religious. And I'm like, you've known me for 10 years. Do I strike you as a particularly religious person? No. I've been going to AA for 34 years, my friend. Why would you take the knowledge of someone who's tried it once and is still drinking, as opposed to doing your own understanding of who we are and what we are? And by the way, we have atheist meetings, we have agnostic meetings, we have Buddhist meetings. So don't throw me that. I mean, I see those posts on our therapist Facebook stuff all the time. No religion, no AA. I'm like, oh my God, you just don't understand us. You know, that's not who we are.
Well, I think it's just there's a lot of animosity between the recovery community and the mental health community. And that's why I like teaching the LAT courses so much, because that tends to be where you find the bridge people, right? Either people that are out of the recovery community coming into trying to get that mental health community built like you did, or people showing up in the mental health community understanding that therapy isn't the only thing that can help people and shouldn't be the only thing helping almost anybody. Well, man, I want to be respectful of your time, and I still got to grab your stories here about you explicitly. So I think we got to just kind of jump into the personal questions. And I've been excited because I know you've been thinking about it. What's a truth about masculinity that you learned before you were 12 that's still true today?
And I would say I learned this through example, not through anyone telling me. I'm going to use my dad as my reference. It was his job to provide and make sure that we were safe and protected, and that we had food, clothing, housing, education. That was his job, is to make sure that we had the wherewithal to make those things occur. And I'm not saying exclusive.
Like I would say being in a provider's role is a masculine role, and that doesn't need to gender the role, right? I'm not saying what equipment somebody has to have, but there is something very masculine about being the person that goes and gets what the family needs on a structural level, while having somebody make sure that they're leading and taking the lead on the emotional things. And it doesn't mean that you don't cross those boundaries and back up the other person's lane. But I do think one of the ways that we've been talking about masculinity that's been kind of damaging is this idea that being a provider isn't masculine. And it just is. And it's okay that it is. It just doesn't need to be like a man doing it.
Right. It's not only masculine. But I would just say that in my world, that's how I was brought up. And I was like, oh, okay. Got it.
Well, and it sounds like your father was an exemplary dad for a guy of his time. He provided well, he provided the structure and stability he could, and he was not exactly the most emotionally communicative guy in the world, which that was his generation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the really fun things about this question in particular is so many guys, it's usually about the dad, right? You don't learn lessons that early based on what people tell you. You learn by watching. And so that question has been really, really fun. The next one is tell us about a time when your pursuit of manhood hurt you.
Oh, yeah. No, ironically, it was my first marriage. I was trying to step in. My first wife was divorced. Her husband was in prison, and she had 2 small children. And man, I rode up on that white horse and put on my Superman outfit, and I was like, I have got this, and I will be handling things from here on out. I will be solving problems and taking care of everything. Then I started chasing the drama, right? Every time there was drama, I'd fix it. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it made you feel safe.
Right. But instead of having the boundary of, okay, so I'm here to provide, everybody's safe, everybody's got food, everyone's got, things are good, we got insurance, I make money, things are groovy. When she started creating all the drama and the crave by overspending and causing trouble and stuff like that, I kept chasing that and trying to fix that because I thought I could handle that. It was my role, right? And it was something I was taught by my dad, right? Because he had the same problem. And that's not my job. If you're doing things to destroy your life, I will speak to you and tell you, I think this is a mistake. And as my partner, I would like, we need to talk about this and sort through this. But I'm not going to clean up your messes.
Yeah, the fixing mentality, yeah, it's a hard one. And coming out of a family of addiction, it's so, because that's what we did as kids, right? Not only the dad, but everybody was just trying to fix the mess from the person using all the time.
That was your job.
And ironically, it was also one of the things that made my first marriage not go well. We have that in common.
How about that? Who would have thought?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because one of the things around that I think a lot of people don't understand when they talk about it, because we talk about it from the fixer's perspective, right? That that's in you and you're trying to do this. But one of the things that often gets left out is you're setting up the other person for failure. You're structuring things to be the fixer, which doesn't let them be the competent adult that they probably are. And they're usually not asking for it.
You're creating a codependency where you're the rescuer, you're the enabler, you're the problem solver, you're the fixer, which doesn't allow the other person to learn how to take care of themselves and solve their problems and learn from their mistakes. When you're constantly jumping in to fix, they're like, what you're teaching them is, I don't have to do this, he'll take care of it.
Or he won't let me do this. That kind of dynamic becomes controlling at a certain point.
And the subliminal message to that, or the underbelly message to that is, he thinks I'm incompetent. They think I'm stupid. And that's the message that gets sent across when someone is constantly trying to fix you.
Yeah, falling into that pattern is probably the single greatest regret of my life, was that happening in my marriage as well. It's a hard thing to come out on the other side of. And I very much relate to that story. I knew we had things in common. I didn't know about that one.
Who would have thought? And look what we do for a living.
Hey, those who can't do teach. That's my quote I live by these days.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Oh, making our mistakes and getting better. Speaking of getting better, we can jump into the last question. Tell us about a time where pursuing masculinity and manhood empowered you.
So in April of 2018, my wife had a routine colonoscopy, and the results came back that she had colorectal cancer. And the next day, she had another full body scan, and they found out that she also had kidney cancer. And that launched us on basically let's be clear, a 9-month journey of treatment, and then another 2 years of recovery, of chemo, radiation, surgery, and I became her primary caretaker. All the programming that I had, that, this is my wife, this is my partner, and it is my job to protect her and help her and not fix her, because I knew I couldn't fix her or save her, but it was my job to make sure that things were in order so she could be helped and taken care of. And according to my wife, I did a very good job. And she's like, I can't imagine doing this with anybody but you. And then, just to throw a bonus thing here, 2 years ago, this week actually, we were in Copenhagen, Denmark. And the day before we left, she tripped and fell on a cobblestone street and broke her ankle in 3 places. And had to spend the night in the Danish hospital. And then we flew home. They put her in a soft cast and gave her a bunch of blood thinners and medication. They're like, you need to go home. Don't stay here. We can do the surgery, but you're going to be here for months. And we're like, nope, we're out of here. And we flew back. But from May to September, again, she couldn't walk. And I was her primary caretaker. And that is definitely, I would say, for me, that was about being true to my masculinity and true to what I believe my responsibilities are and who I am as a person. I would tell you, I think that has a lot to do with where we are now. I mean, she cooks for me. She cooks for us almost every night. And that means a lot to me. I'll send her recipe suggestions like, hey, this looks really good. And so she can't eat red meat, right? Because she only has 1 kidney and the colorectal stuff. And I'm like, let's try this. Let's try that. And she's like, oh, okay, sure, I'll make that. Let's see how it goes. And then my job, I always tell her, you can leave the kitchen a complete disaster. That is my job to clean that mess up. You went to the effort of making this wonderful, amazing, incredible dinner. I will take the responsibility of cleaning up, putting everything away, rearranging. That's my gig.
And that's the balance you all have found, and it works for you.
Yeah. And I have to admit to the fact that I do, when she starts putting things in the dishwasher, I'm like, I appreciate that. She goes like, I know, you're going to rearrange it.
Well, Alan Alda made that quote in his book. If I understood you, would I have this look on my face was the title of the book. And it's basically just an empathetic communication book. And one of the things in there that always strikes a chord is the second most common fight in marriage is how to load the dishwasher. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for coming on and sharing all this about 12-step. At some point, I'm probably going to heckle you to see if we can get one of the 12-step skills that you'd recommend for just anybody. And I'll put that up with this just so people can have some more structure on what they're trying to do. And maybe have you come back on and talk about it at some point. But it's been really good hearing you talk about the work, man. I always love how you do. And I like having you in the community. I'm really glad we got to share you with the viewers today.
I thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
And that's our conversation with Kevin. We're so lucky he was willing to come on and share his story as an insight with us. Sorry again about the video going out about the 14th mark, but we had the technical issue with Kevin off in the mountains. At least we could still hear the conversation. I'm glad it still worked out. There's only a few things we need to clarify and make sure that are lined up really well. So 12-step isn't just something that like Kevin and other people in 12-step talk about being good. There's actually really good data behind it, talking about how community and the structures provided by 12-step really do help quite a few people with their recovery and maintain their abstinence from a substance. And that data keeps getting renewed. The second thing I'd like to check a little bit is on how masculinity shows up at 12-step. Things like accountability and transparency improves men engagement in mental health and recovery. That's also really well documented. It's one of those things that there just aren't a lot of places outside of religious organizations that are doing that. So it's a place we can get that. The next one is we talked a lot about different kinds of support. And of course, we want to involve our family and our loved ones in any major changes we're making. But it's important to remember that family and close loved ones cannot provide you everything you need. And generally speaking, what I like to say that we require is we need community, we need our family, whether that's chosen family or birth family. And we generally need some kind of medical engagement, whether that's therapy, medications, etc. And so if you're making a major change in your life, particularly around recovery, make sure that you get all three. Whether it's 12-step or some other peer organization, whether it's therapy or coaching or medication, hopefully you're getting as many of those as you can to make this really hard change to your life. The last thing we want to kind of clarify a little bit is that family can't do everything for you, right? We always want to involve our close family and close friends in our changes that we're making when they're really monumental. However, they're not going to be able to help with everything. You need to spread out the support a little bit. That's why these communities are really fantastic, whether it's 12-step or something else, and why things like therapy and medication are also really helpful when making those major changes. And there's really good data behind the more support and avenues of support you have, the more likely you are to maintain a change that you're trying to go for. So those are kind of the three main fact check points that I wanted to just clarify and get in there a little bit. If this helped you understand 12-step, if this helped you explore it for a journey for you, or just helped you understand a loved one's journey through it, please share it around. Find somebody else that needs this. We really want to get the word out. Also, remember that this was an hour-long conversation with an expert. It's not going to give you everything you need on the topic. If you're going to make a major change like this, please remember this does not replace therapy. Your story is unique, and so is the needs for your care. Make sure that you're getting the right care and right resources for you. I'll see you next week when we talk to an expert around the differences between blue collar and white collar and what they can learn from each other. I'm really excited to share it with you. I can't wait to see you there.